Welcome back to Musician Training for Worship Musicians. Rhythm, Part 2. Okay, forewarning, this is where it starts to get a little bit more complicated with explaining the basics. So if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, don't worry. Just, go to YouTube, look up lots of different explanations of what I'm talking about here. You have to kind of learn about all these things together and separately at the same time, which is a little bit, I know, a little bit paradoxical, but it's true, I think, in the way I think about it anyway. Okay, so here we're talking, we talked about note value last time, we're talking about time signature here in part 2. Last time in note value, we described note values in terms of fractions. So we have whole notes and half notes and quarter notes and dotted notes as well. Time signatures, which is in blue here, time signatures look like fractions, but they are not fractions. I'll explain what they are in just a minute. In terms of what the numbers mean and why they're stacked like this. First of all, that's the first thing to know, is time signatures are not fractions, even though they look like them. Second thing to know is the difference between simple and compound time signatures. A simple time signature, briefly, is subdivision divides into 2, compound subdivision divides into 3. Speaking of subdivisions, next we're going to talk about beats and subdivisions. This is really how we understand simple versus compound time signature. It is in terms of the beats and the subdivisions, and that all shows itself in using a specific time signature. Last of all, and this is kind of the most confusing part, or can be the most confusing part about time signatures and rhythm, is the measure value and how many beats are in the measure based on all of this stuff. Okay, so here we go. Time signatures are not a fraction, yes. So over here we have examples of the 3 main food groups, I guess you want to call it there. Simple time signatures are on the top, compounds on the bottom. Notice there are some main differences between the two of them. There are time signatures with 2 beats, which we call duple time signatures. There are time signatures with 3 beats, which we call triple time signatures, and quadruple is 4 beats. And you notice this is laid out in a grid pattern because we can have a duple simple time signature, like 2-4, and we can also have a duple compound time signature, like 6-8. And again, duple means there's 2 beats in each measure. We can have a simple triple time signature, or a simple or a triple compound, simple quadruple, compound quadruple, and yes. There's also irregular time signatures. We're not talking about that right now. Go learn about that on your own if you care to. So what do the numbers in the time signatures mean? Let me draw this down here as an example. I'll just draw a 4-4 time signature at the bottom down here. So 4-4, what does that mean? The top number, this is universal across all time signatures, the top number essentially tells you the measure value of, or tells you part of the equation of the measure value. It tells you how many of a certain kind of note, which is to say quarter notes and half notes and eighth notes and stuff. The top number tells you how many of a certain kind of note is in each measure. So the top number is how many? The bottom number tells you how many of what? The bottom number tells you the note value. It's going to be a quarter note, a half note. It can be any of them. That has a few different notations. So the top number can theoretically be any number, any integer, and the bottom number can only be the denominator of one of the note value fractions that we have. So it can only be a fourth for a quarter. It can only be a half for a half. A 2 for a half, sorry. We generally don't see a 1, but theoretically it could be there. You could have 4-1 time signature, which means 4 whole notes in each measure. So yes, the bottom number tells you how many of what note value. So for 4/4, it's 4 quarter notes. For 2/4, it's 2 quarter notes. For 3/4, it's 3 quarter notes. 4/4, 4 quarter notes. 6/8 means 6/8 notes. 9/8 means there's 9/8 notes. 12/8 means there's 12/8 notes. That tells you the full equation for the measure value. And that is what that means. The measure value will equal the note value of all of the notes combined into that measure. And if the two do not match, then you have a problem, basically. So simple versus compound time signature. Simple, I said it briefly before, simple means for every single beat in the measure, say for 4/4, because it's a simple time signature. 4/4 is a simple time signature. For every beat in a simple time signature, that beat can divide evenly into 2 parts. And when you're thinking about note values, that means you're going to have a note value of a quarter or of a half note. And that quarter note, if that quarter note is the beat, then it will divide into 2 eighth notes. If the half note gets the beat, if it's, say, a measure of 3/2, right, that would be 3 half notes in each measure. And it's a simple triple, 3 beats also, and that means that the half note gets a beat. So in simple time, that half note would divide evenly into 2 parts, which would give you 2 quarter notes, which gives you, it's just a different way of doing the same thing, basically. Right, so there's simple time signature. I think that is pretty well explained there. Each beat divides evenly into 2 parts. Compound time signature, here we are. All of our compound time signatures here. For compound time, the beat, it still has a beat, but the beat divides evenly into 3 even parts. So think about note values again. What does this mean? Can you divide a quarter into 3 parts evenly? No. Can you divide a whole note into 3 parts evenly? Can you divide a half note into 3 parts evenly? No. So what does that mean? That means in compound time signature, your beat has to be a dotted note. It has to be, because only a dotted note can be divided into 3 even parts. Think about it. A dotted quarter note is 3 eighth notes. A dotted half note is 3 quarter notes. So only a dotted note can be your beat in a time signature that is compound. And so that has different implications on how we write the time signature and how we categorize them as 2 beats, 3 beats, 4 beats. Since, let's take 6/8 as an example right here. Since the beat in a compound time signature has to divide into 3 parts, and we have to have we have to have a dotted note as our beat, and since we set our measure value as being 6/8 notes long, that means that 6/8 has to be a duple time signature, because 3 eighth notes, 3 of those eighth notes has to go into 1 dotted quarter note to give you 1 beat. And since you only have 3 eighth notes left that go into the other dotted quarter note, that means you only have 2 beats, and both of those beats are represented as dotted quarter notes in 6/8. Right, I said this would be a little bit more complicated, right? So if you need that explained in a different way, the best way to do that is, again, go to YouTube, search for compound time signatures explanation. It'll be something like that, hopefully. And maybe somebody can find a different way, a simpler way of explaining it than I can. Or at least a way that works better for you. But that's the way that I explain it. Right, so we can have, again, 3 of these eighth notes in 6/8. That's half of our measure value goes into 1 beat. That means the other half is into the other beat. Well, for 9/8, that gives us enough eighth notes for 3 beats. 12/8 gives us enough for 4 beats. So we can have the same number of beats as we can in a simple time signature, except they will be divided into 3 even parts instead of simple into 2 even parts. And yes, right. Anyway, moving on. So beats versus subdivisions. Well, this fits right into that. The beat is what you tap your foot to. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, am I counting simple or compound time there? I'm not really counting either because I'm only counting the beat. The beat doesn't tell you if it's simple or compound. What tells you simple and compound is the subdivision, and that is the 2 or 3 even parts that the beat divides into. So for a simple time signature, we have the downbeat is 1, 2, 3, 4. But we also have an upbeat, which is the halfway point between the downbeats. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. In compound time signature, we do not have an upbeat. We have 2 remaining parts of that beat, 2 remaining subdivisions. Because again, a dotted note has to divide into 3 even parts to give us our beat. So that goes 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and and that's when you really get into the place where it's a little bit easier to understand the difference between the two. It's hearing the difference between the two, between simple and compound time signature. The difference is really apparent. It's da 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 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and or 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a. Those are 2 time signatures. Quadruple. I used 4/4 and 12/8, I guess there. They were both at the same tempo, but one sounded a lot faster than the other because it had more subdivisions for the beat. It had 3, 12/8. And the beat was still moving at the same pace. 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and a 4 and a 1 and 2 and 3 and a 4 and a, right? It's kind of mixing them together there. You can hear the difference between the 2 of them. That's the same tempo, but 2 different time signatures, simple and compound. Okay. Hopefully I'm explaining all that enough and repeating it enough, but not repeating it too much. Lastly, measure value and beats. And this takes us down here to this section of the board right here, where I've compared 3/4 time, which is simple triple time, which means 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and like that. That's 3/4 time. Versus 6/8, which is duple compound. 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a. So there's only 2 beats here versus 3 beats here. So why is this confusing? Well, if you notice, both 3/4 and 6/8 have the same measure value, which is to say, you can add up all of the notes within both of these within both of these time signatures, and it would look like they're the same. It would look like they're equivalent to each other. And yet this is 3 beats and this is 2. We can see that there are 6/8 notes that can comprise a 3/4 bar. And there's also 6/8 notes that comprise a 6/8 bar. So I guess it's a little bit confusing. How do we know that this is only a triple simple time signature? Why can't this be a compound duple time signature like 6/8 since it's the same measure value? Well, that's because, right, the beat has to divide. Well, the beat has to divide enough times, and I'm not explaining this very well. The time signature itself is basically the key here. So think about the beat right? And think about the requirements of the beat. Compound time signature, the beat has to divide into even 3 parts, right? And which means we have to have a dotted note as our beat. Well, if we had a dotted note as our beat in 3/4 time, well, we would still have only 2 dotted quarter notes there, because a dotted quarter note is the same as 3/8 notes. But we'd only have 2, and our this is a triple time signature, which means it has to have 3 beats. So we could only get 2 beats if we divided it that way. If we were only using a quarter notes, and we had 3 quarter notes, but maybe a half note, a dotted half note was our beat value. Well, then we'd only have 1 beat in each measure, right? Because a dotted half note is the same value as this. It's the same value as 6/8 notes. Or it's the same value as 3 quarter notes. There's 1 quarter note, 2 quarter notes, 3 quarter notes together. Hopefully I'm explaining that visually again. If this is confusing, go and watch some other videos on it. It's a hard concept to understand. And this is the simplest way that I could explain it off the cuff without a script, as I am right now. But this is basically our gospel for this, I guess. There is simple time signatures, there are compound time signatures, and within simple and compound we can have 2 beats, 3 beats, or 4 beats per each measure. The most common ones that we're going to see in worship music is going to be 6/8 and 4/4. 3/4 time is waltz time, so we're probably not going to be playing many waltzes. 2/4 is sometimes used as cut time, and again, how these time signatures are used kind of depends on the composer. But maybe you would use 2/4 for a different purpose, or if you really wanted to do a strong kind of drum and bass thing, you might use 2/4. 9/8 and 12/8, yeah, we don't see them for whatever reason. 6/8 is the most common version that we see. Anyway, so that is time signatures. And I don't know how long this video is, but it's pretty long, I'm betting. Next part, in part 3, we're going to talk about rhythmic solfege, which hopefully will tie all this stuff together, and we'll get a few examples of what these look like in some music maybe.